Why, hello there. At the time of recording, it is 116 days until Shadow of the Erdtree comes out, and this is the Elden Wait countdown, where every day until the Shadow of the Erdtree releases, I will be talking about the game to make the wait just a little bit shorter. If you'd like to take this journey with me, please subscribe to the Lore Hunter and make sure to turn notifications on so that you get every video as it comes out. So on day 118, I talked about Melina and the Shadow of the Erdtree. A common parallel conversation that arose from that video was discussing the special leveling up system in Shadow of the Erdtree and how that affects various things like the graces and runes and all that. It became clear that there's lots of confusion and misunderstanding about this topic. So in this video I want to explore this new special leveling up system for the DLC and see what it means for the Shadow of the Erdtree. Let's get into it. First off, I want to say that when I first read about this system, I was also confused, primarily because I didn't understand why it was being implemented. What unlocked it for me was Ratatosker's video about the topic, in which he was able to present a very compelling argument for why FromSoft was adding this mechanic into the DLC. So I'm going to sort of paraphrase it here and put it into my own words what Ratatosker said, so watch his video linked in the description below for his full excellent explanation. But let's talk about this as a jumping off point to then further understand what we know about this system. So to paraphrase Ratatosker's explanation, the system was created to let all players, even high-level players, have the experience of coming across a challenge, bouncing off of it, exploring elsewhere, and then coming back when stronger. And this is a huge part of the Elden Ring experience. I think this is well illustrated by how new players, one of the first things you'll do following the grace is to get to Margit, you'll bounce off the boss fight, and then go out into the world and explore to become stronger, and then come back and overcome the challenge when you've got some levels under your feet and you've got better equipment. And Ratatosker points out that many players go into DLC at a high level, so there's not really much room for more character progression, and this system seems made to create that sense of progression for high-level players, and is an extra boost for low-level players to meet the challenges of Shadow of the Erdtree. So now that we have a basic understanding of why the system was implemented, let's actually look at the Miyazaki quote and unpack it with this basic understanding. And I'd like to give credit to this translation from Reddit user The Angry Furlong, who posted it onto the Elden Ring subreddit and is a good, understandable translation of the Famitsu article. Famitsu asks if there's any unique elements to the DLC, and Miyazaki answers in this first part, there is an element of leveling unique to the DLC. Think of the attack power system in Sekiro. Separate from the original level system, there is an attack power that is only enabled in the DLC areas. The system is unique to the DLC and is only enabled in the Land of Shadow, and it doesn't affect the base game. Miyazaki likens the systems to memories in Sekiro, which were dropped by bosses upon defeat and could be consumed at an idol to increase attack power, dealing more posture and vitality damage. It presumably works similarly in Shadow of the Erdtree, with certain bosses dropping the equivalent of a memory key item that your character can then consume at a grace or with an NPC to give some kind of attack power increase. And knowing From Software, they'll have some lore to tie this mechanic into the story and explain why it only works in the Land of Shadow. While I can't begin to speculate on the details of how this attack power increase works, I do think this will be manipulating your character's damage numbers and not something like increasing your stats. Given that they only work in the DLC, having it affect your character's stats, which could then affect what gear is equipped and how the weight of it affects your character, seems like it would be pretty obnoxious and fiddly, and I don't see that happening. Now let's continue on to the next part of the Miyazaki quote, where he says, "This was introduced in order to give freedom to meet threats mentioned earlier, so you can do something like exploring other areas before going back to challenge bosses that were too strong the first time, allowing you to more easily experience this even in the high-level range." This section of Miyazaki's quote is the basis for Ratatosker's explanation about how the system was created to give even high-level players that sense of progression through exploration, found in bouncing off a challenge, adventuring and getting stronger, and then returning to overcome the challenge. And I also want to bring up the quote that Miyazaki references as having mentioned earlier in this previous section. Famitsu asked, "When did the DLC become so large?" Miyazaki answered, "When we thought about an experience worthy of Elden Ring, we felt that this size was necessary. There are the threats that need to be overcome, and there is the degree of freedom to engage in that. There's excitement of exploring the unknown and what you might discover at the end of each journey, an altogether Elden Ring-worthy adventure." Miyazaki describes the quintessential Elden Ring experience as adventuring around the world, engaging and disengaging with threats as you freely explore the vast unknown. This highlights how progressing your character through exploration to overcome threats is an integral part of this process, and why FromSoft felt the need to layer on another mechanic to ensure that players of any level would get that experience. Miyazaki's quote ends with this, "On the other hand, by keeping your attack power low, you can also experience this challenge at a lower level. Sensibly, part of giving the player freedom is the ability to not bolster attack power and keep the challenge as it stands." In discussing this topic on the Lore Hunter Discord server, someone mentioned how they enjoyed the memory system in Sekiro for how you could choose to forgo consuming a memory if you felt the challenge of the game was as desired, and it's the same way with this system in Shadow of the Erdtree. I remember my first time playing Sekiro getting all the upgrades I could before Genichiro to be at my toughest, and then challenging myself in my second playthrough to take him on right away and not getting all of the upgrades. I can see the same thing happening to me with Shadow of the Erdtree, where you can make for yourself these little challenges where you don't engage with this system or you only use it a little bit, and I think that sounds kind of nice. Now that we've discussed what we know about this system, I want to apply this understanding further to other aspects that are related in the DLC. One point of debate that I've run into is if there will be traditional leveling in Shadow of the Erdtree at Graces, and I think that of course there will be. This special leveling system is to help create the experience FromSoft wants players to have in the DLC, not to replace the RPG mechanics that are still at the core of Elden Ring. Enemies will drop runes and you will level up at Graces. Imagine how silly it would be for the DLC to give you all these new weapons and weapon types, and then force you to leave the DLC to go farm runes in the main game to level up and get the right stats to use your new toys. It just doesn't make any sense. On a related note, there has been this theory going around that this shot of what appears to be a great rune is maybe what a Site of Grace looks like in the DLC, and this quote is offered as support. Essentially, the player will be following in Miquella's footsteps in the same way that they followed the blessings from the Grace, the Sites of Grace in the Lands Between. They'll be following in Miquella's footsteps, and these will guide them through the Land of Shadow and reveal that motivation to them. I think it's plausible that the Graces and Guidance of Grace look different to represent following Miquella's footsteps through the Land of Shadow, and could very well be this great rune. That being said, I think that they will functionally be the same with perhaps a special feature related to the DLC, like being able to consume the Sekiro memory-like items. Miyazaki confirmed in the interview that fast travel will work as normal at these Graces, and I expect other functions like leveling and mixing physics will also be available. And there you have it, Shadow of the Erdtree's special leveling explained. I think that while it's initially a little confusing, it's really a pretty simple and elegant system to make sure that players experience the ethos of Elden Ring in the DLC. This system won't replace the core RPG mechanics of Elden Ring. It won't affect how you level up as normal. You'll still get runes from enemies so that you can make your build and you can play with all the new toys and wear all the new clothes that we'll find in the DLC. Let me know in the comments what your initial impressions are of this new system. Do you think you'll use it in the DLC, or do you think you'll forgo to keep that challenge? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you want to join me on the journey to the Shadow of the Erdtree, please subscribe to Lore Hunter and make sure you turn on notifications so that you can get every video as it's released. Thanks for watching.